We didn't have a lot of systems. We got up really early. We went to work. We made the sandwich. We had a little bit. I mean, we were organized. We cleaned up every night. We locked up every night. We came back and did it again. How many systems do you need? And that's why I stood next to the case and said, it's so great. You don't have to write anything down. 12 years later with 150 people, you got to write stuff down. Because now we got 25 people making sandwiches and they all got a different recipe in their head. How's that go for quality control? Not good. Service starts to come apart. Because we're managing them, they're not giving great service, then we're mad at them for not giving great service because it's so obvious we can't believe they're screwing it up. Then our energy's bad, then their service gets worse, and then we get madder. Yes, sir?
How did you actually address that challenge you spoke of a few minutes ago where you were ready, you were in the mature stage, but Paul was back in the building stage?
That's a great question. I went to therapy.
I don't want to do that.
Well, you can. You don't have to because I'm going to tell you what I learned.
Good.
I still would recommend therapy, but that's this afternoon. So I'm going to therapy, and I didn't go to therapy for business reasons, but after I worked through a lot of the personal nonsense I had created in my life, then I realized I had all the same problems at work. Whoa. So I started complaining about Paul because I was like, this is terrible, man. We got to have these things and get this structured, and he keeps arguing with me. And I had a very good therapist, and he goes, well, is he stopping you? And I'm like, well, no, but we're co-leaders, and we got to be in there together doing this. And he goes, yeah, but is he stopping you from doing it? Like, if you call the meeting, does he tell everybody not to go? I'm like, no. And I'm like, but he's got to be in there with me. I mean, we've done this together. We're both owners. We got to do this together. And he goes, well, you better get over it. Because he's not gonna. And he just said, it's just the way it is. He's got some roles in the business. You got some roles in the business. It's pretty clear. Part of your role is you're going to run this part. If he was stopping you, you have a different problem. But you're letting his disagreement hold you back from doing what's right, and that's your problem, not his. And he was right. And so I just called the meeting. Did Paul help me organize it? No. I mean, I'm not down on Paul. There's other things he's fabulous at that I was clueless about. Again, his diversity in the workplace is healthy. But the point is, the problem was mine. Because I was waiting for his permission, and I didn't need it. Because he wasn't stopping me, he just wasn't ready to do the work. Is this sounding familiar? Sometimes the leader got to step up, and whether that's social change, leading an organization, parenting, it doesn't matter. We got to do what doesn't seem popular because it's the right thing, and in the end, everybody's going to love you, but that might take 5 years. In the meantime, they're going to hate you. Okay, so number one thing is systems. Number two thing is bringing in expertise, which we couldn't have afforded in the beginning, but now we need. So then we went out and we hired a chief financial officer because it was our weakest area was our financial knowledge. We made it through as a startup, but all of a sudden, like, I don't understand balance sheets at the level I need to understand them. We need expertise. We needed marketing help. That's where, for a while, you could outsource it. That's what Wayne Mullins does, but we brought it into the organization. So we started to bring in these people. If we had hired those people as a startup, we would have been out of business in a year because we would have been broke. Is this making sense? So it's not what's right or wrong in perpetuity. It's what's right at the startup stage becomes a failure later. And vice versa. If we had spent the money on an HR expert, a chief financial officer, and a marketing manager with 2 employees, we wouldn't have lasted 3 weeks because we'd be broke. But trying to run a 150-person business without any of that is equally insane. It's just that we've gotten this far without it, so we think that we delude ourselves into pulling it off instead of accepting what's really going on. The third thing is that we need to stick with the changes a lot longer than we are traditionally comfortable with. Because see, when you're a startup, which most of us have been through, there's only 3-4 employees. You could change stuff in 2 weeks, in a day. But when you got 150 employees, and they're not all in the same location sometimes, it takes 2 years. And then we're mad. When you're mad and frustrated at the employees for not changing quickly, how's your energy? When your energy's bad, how's their response? Okay? So, 3 things. Systems and structure, hiring people with expertise that we didn't have, and then sticking with the changes a lot longer than we had before. Those are critical. Okay? A healthy organization can handle adversity in a healthy way. In a healthy organization at this stage, we can see trouble coming. We can plan for trouble. We have savings accounts, contingency plans, we're ready. We don't love it, but it's not a shock. This is like in sports and football, the good team runs the 2-minute drill very well at the end of the game. It's not like they want to be losing in order to run the 2-minute drill. It's just they get good at the 2-minute drill so that when they are in that situation, it's not a, oh my God, what are we going to do? They're ready. They're ready to go in and deal with stuff. Do it.
Maybe they did it better in Louisiana. It didn't work too well in Louisiana.
It's okay. In Michigan, they're having a terrible year. But anyway, my point is, healthy organizations operating in prime are good at recovery. They can see problems coming. Everybody in the organization kind of knows their role. They know what to do. And there's a vision. Same theme. If you're starting to get into this stage and there's no long-term inspiring vision, it's just bureaucracy. Systems for the sake of systems is what's called bureaucracy. If the coach comes in and gives you lots of plays to run, but there's no championship to get to, it's just the coach being a jerk, making you run plays. If you understand that running the plays could get you to the championship, now it's a whole different ballgame. Because you're back to building cathedrals instead of laying stone. Okay, so the vision at every stage is important. My experience is the intuitive startup leader had a vision, but then we finish it. So at each of these next 2 stages, it's critical to have a long-term inspiring vision written out that people share, are bought into, and are committed to getting to. Question? Thought?
No, I'm just
Thinking?
I guess when I meant time management earlier, that's exactly what I was referring to at the startup. You got to spend your time in the right place, and you got to see quickly if that is not the place to invest it. And you're hitting on that pretty hard now. So.
Yeah. So here's the thing with time management, okay? There's a couple categories. This is an exercise some of you will have done. 3 categories I would suggest you could put your time into these 3 categories. One is working in the business. One is working on the business. And the third, which is this afternoon, is working on yourself as a leader. In the startup stage, it's appropriate that like 90% of your time is in the business. You're waiting on the customer, you're wrapping the boxes, you're answering the phone, you're taking out the garbage. You're doing everything. It's fine. You only have a few employees. The bigger you get, the more time needs to be spent working on the business. Designing training compacts, designing visual models, writing handbooks, working on mission statements. When you get to our stage, or 150 employees, you really only need as much time in the business as you need to stay connected. Right? So at the startup stage, I would suggest any time not in the business is only where necessary, like a little bit. At the third stage, which is operating in prime, it's only spend as much time in the business as you need to stay connected to the staff and the product. So I sit out on the floor all the time, because one way to do this is to do all of it at once. I don't have an office. I had one, but I never went in it and they gave it away. So I just sit out at one of the tables near the customers, and I do my work. So I can do email, work on the business, and people talk to me. And you know what? They tell me a lot, because I'm sitting right there. They'll tell me what's good, they tell me what's not good, and I see a lot. But the point is, I could be working on a training program, working on a new class, working on a whole initiative, but I'm sitting on the floor. The point is, as we grow, more time needs to be spent on the business, less time in the business. I go on the floor at the Roadhouse and pour water every night. It's relaxing for me. I'm dealing with customers, I'm dealing with the product, I'm picking up paper off the floor, I'm clearing tables, scraping dishes. When you don't do it 50, 60 hours a week, it's fun. No, it is. It's because it's different. But I actually do it for a mindful reason. It's not that they need me to run the floor. They're fine without me. I'm not going to be there tonight because I'm not going to get home till midnight. I wasn't there last night because I was here having dinner at Gary's new restaurant, which was delicious, by the way. But the point is, it's good for them to see me. The customers like to see me. I stay connected to the basics. I never forget that it's all about making each guest happy, that each plate needs to look good, that the smile's got to be there, but it might be an hour. Is this making sense? When we opened, it was 12 hours a day. Now it's an hour. The key is shifting. Questions before I move to the next stage. Is this making any sense? Is this helpful at all? Yeah?
How long do you need to know that you're in that? How long do you need to stay in that mature stage? How long?
Good question. I love that y'all moved too, by the way. Thank you for doing it. How does it look from over here?
We're a penny in for a dollar. Different.
It is different.
It is.
How long can you stay in the mature stage? The beauty of this, so as human beings, we will continue to age or we're gone. That's the way it is. But as a business, I believe an organization can stay in this third stage forever if we run it well, at least for a really long time. Now, it's not easy to run it well. Things can go wrong. If we bringing in people from the outside with expertise sounds good, but it's hard.
They don't have your culture.
They don't have your culture. This is the biggest thing. I wrote about it in here. Jay Peterman, anybody remember them? Yeah, you're in that industry. They were real pioneers in mail order and very good in marketing. And he had a good problem. And if, in hindsight, with this model in mind, he started, it's quite a good story actually. I mean, they started with nothing. He built it up. It was mail orders, shipping interesting high-end clothing and strange antiques that no one needed for a lot of money. But their stories were really good, and they grew. So they grew from the startup, then he hired some more people, and they got bigger. And then he got into what really, in this model, was the third stage. And he said that they started to hire people with expertise, but the problem is the same one we experienced. They hire people who are drawn to your culture because they like it. Like for us, they like that it's casual. They like that we serve the employees. They like that we're values-based. They like that we're not hierarchical. But slowly but surely, they start to try to unconsciously, they try to recreate the culture they left behind. So they love our participative, egalitarian culture at Zingerman's until the busboy says, "I'm not sure that's a good idea, sir." And then they're like, wait a minute. I have a PhD, an MBA, I have 25 years experience. You're a 17-year-old busboy. Who cares what you think? And I'm like, actually, your job is to care what he thinks. And then they don't like it. So this is what happens. More often than not, they unconsciously start to recreate all the things they didn't like in their old job. Why? Because that's what they're used to. It's not unique to that. This is why when people move to another part of the country, for better and for worse, they're going to start to recreate some of what they liked and also what they didn't like about the place they left behind. Okay, so this is what's tricky, is finding the right people. It took us 3 shots to hire an HR director that worked well. And that's with lots of interviewing in a healthy organization, but it's just hard. Like when we hire line cooks, I mean, you hire 4 knowing that 2 aren't going to work out, but you hire a lot of them. But with HR directors, we only hire 1, and it takes a year to find out whether he or she is any good. Because remember, you got to stick with stuff at this stage a lot longer. So I think they're great at week 1, and I want to fire them at week 2. But this is like you drafted some guy in the NBA draft. It's the #1 draft choice. You don't cut them from the team because they had 2 bad games. And you don't give them a big raise if they had 2 good games. It's a long marathon. And this is what happens. So it became very difficult. You can stay at this stage for quite a long time. But not forever if things start to change. And here's some signs that you need to go to the next stage. The product that you had that made you famous, that was really special and unique in the marketplace, is no longer that unique. Like when we opened, whatever, selling sandwiches was like we were the only ones doing that kind of sandwich. If you do something well, what's the marketplace do? They copy you. It's a good problem. But what was once unique becomes not very unique anymore. So if you're at that 3rd stage and your main products are not that unique anymore, they're not that special, this is trouble. In our part of the world, this would be the auto companies. Like, this is why when the economy collapsed, it was like this big shock. I'm like, dude, you've been making mediocre products for 25 years. The only shock is that you didn't understand it. Like, where have you been? I don't know if I told this story here, but I think it was, what are we now, 2014? It was 2010 in Asheville, North Carolina. Was the first time in my entire adult life anybody spontaneously recommended an American car to me, not a truck, a car. And I wasn't 17. And I'm like, what marketing studies have y'all been doing? Because I live an hour away from where you make all these cars, and no one's ever recommended your product to me. Did you really have a shock when the economy collapsed and things, the legs got knocked out from under you? Okay, so your product is no longer special. It's not compelling. People aren't excited to come to you. It's time to change. When you've lost the inspiration, when you've lost your vision, it's time to change. When technology has changed around you, it's time to change. So we love books, but we go back to old school books. So I got off the grid. We're not in mass distribution. We do all our own design. They're on nice paper. We print them in Ann Arbor locally. So we've gone the opposite way of the industry, which is going away from it, okay? If you were in the record business, there's still a place for records, for LPs, but it's a very specialized market. It's not what it was when we were kids, and that's all there was record stores, and I was buying armloads of them. Now it's like only the collector who wants to spend more money and really understands that the turntable does truly sound better, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody else is watching it on YouTube for free. So if technology changes and what you do is now obsolete, you need to change. Is this making sense? It will happen to all of us at some point. It's just you could stay in prime for a long time. When that happens, it's time to change everything about your model. Not the core elements of your culture that are healthy, but what was making you great in the beginning is no longer making you great. In fact, holding on to it is going to, what happened to the auto companies is what's going to happen to you. If you're in charge, all it is you have a great seat on the Titanic. You got a luxury box on the Titanic. So you're going to have a wonderful, cushy seat, but you're still going down. Okay, at this stage, the leader needs to have a couple of big skills on page 11. This is the 4th stage, is to lead the organization through change. The leader needs to have a lot of courage. See, at the startup stage, we had courage too, but it's like, if you put a 5-year-old up on a wall and you go, they want to get down, they just jump. They don't call the structural engineer to give them assessment on statistics of 5-year-olds who break their legs when jumping off walls. They don't say, Mom, could you check with the insurance and make sure it's paid up before I jump? They don't say, everybody's watching me and I might look stupid, so I'm not going to jump. They just jump. So when we opened Zingerman's in 1982, I didn't really worry about it. I'd already quit my other job. My only expenses were my rent and my car payment. I didn't need to worry about food because we were going to cook it all day. And as Paul said, we might not make any money, but we won't starve to death. So the risk was very low. But after you've had success in business, in life, in music, in sports, it becomes much harder to make that internal decision to go for greatness and leave behind what got us to success. This is why the musician who broke the model and made some cutting-edge piece of music that made him or her famous in the beginning, if they're not really diligent, gets in a rut, and the 10th album is way less interesting than the first album, even though they're more famous. Because when they made that first album, they just departed like the first people that were doing rap, the first people that were doing jazz back in the 20s. They broke all the molds. It's easy when you're poor and broke and young. The hard part's when you got a house payment, everybody in town knows what you do, all your friends are doing the same thing. And now you want to make jazz when everybody else is making classical is risky. So you got to have courage to go for greatness again. You got to have it back to the beginning. Big emotional resilience and stamina. And you got to have the willingness to do what you did in the beginning, which is to go against what everybody else says. Because everybody else is going to be bought into the status quo because they got house payments, salaries, friends, and families also, and they're not going to be that excited when you go, hey man, I was thinking, let's rip up everything we do and kind of start over. You're going to be like, I'm 45, I don't want to start over. I already did that once. It was hard. Remember when we were working 14-hour days, 7 days a week? It was hard. I don't want to do that. But that's what it takes to start over and change your business. Courage, internal resilience, and willingness to go against the grain, to go for the same greatness that got you to success in the beginning when you were just getting going. Is this making any sense? At this stage, it becomes all about vision. My opinion only, and we'll probably never know, but if somebody at one of the auto companies in 1985 had said, mainstream automobiles are over. I mean, we're not going to stop making them, but it's clear, it's not a big differentiator. We lost it to the others. But here's the deal. I could see with energy costs, fabulous trains could be the future. And our company is going to be known all over the world for making the most innovative, energy-efficient, comfortable trains. And I know we're famous for cars now, but in 20 years, when you think of Ford, General Motors, whatever, we're going to make trains that are so good, the whole world will be buying them from us. They'll be coming from all over the world to come to Detroit to learn about trains and how to implement trains and bring trains into play, and you'll be blown away by the quality of our work. If they had done that, and stuck with it, it would be a different situation in Detroit. But no one had, and it's easy for me to say, I wasn't in there, so I'm not cutting on them, but I'm just saying, nobody did that. All they did was try to keep doing the same thing that had been working for the previous 20 years that was increasingly ineffective, and do it harder. What they should have seen is that profits were nil, and all they had was bad profit. Ford Motor Company, for a while, the only money they made was from leasing fees. So your whole core business, you're not making any money on it. The only money they made was from this adjunct source that they had basically to get you to spend your money that you didn't have and make interest on it. That's not a good sign. When people don't love your product, when you don't love your product, when you have lost this cathedral, when your product is being copied and beaten all over the place, it's time to change and go for something new. This is what we did at Zingerman's in 1993 and 4. So when we, going back a few pages in your workbook, on page 7. So when we opened the deli, as I told you, we did not have a vision the way that we currently teach vision. But in hindsight, like all of you all that started a business, we had one in our head. Here's the key elements. We knew we wanted a unique place. We didn't want to be a copy because we like cool, unique energy. Page 7, top of the page. We knew we wanted great corned beef, great food, great service, great place to work in a very down-to-earth setting. And we knew we only wanted one of them. Now, if you had asked me what my vision was in 1982, I wouldn't have really been able to explain it like that, but we had one, just like you had one, or your parents had one, or whatever when they started. When we opened a deli, everybody told us we were doomed to fail. Ann Arbor had 12 or 10 delis fail in the previous decade. The neighborhood was considered a bad neighborhood. There's still no parking, and up until cell phones, you couldn't find it because there's so many weird one-way streets. That was 82. And plus, by the way, Gary and I were discussing this. Does anybody remember what interest rates were in 1982?
13, 18.
Yeah, 18%. So it's not like we were in this boom economy. Everything was going out of business. See, in Michigan, the economy's been bad most of the years we've been open. We never had any boom years.
But you can borrow money.
We borrowed $20,000 on Paul's. When I teach our employees about it, because we're open book, I have to explain the 18% was not for credit card debt. It was to the bank. And they're like, that's impossible. No, it's not. It's exactly what it was, 18%. Anyway, that was 82. By 86 or 87, we were considered geniuses. Everybody knew that Ann Arbor had always needed a deli. It was a fabulous neighborhood, a brilliant location. This is true of all great things in life: social change, music, art, sports, whatever. We added on a couple times. We had grown. By the early 90s, we were at a point, like I said earlier, where we had reached organizational midlife. This first vision was done. I didn't know it, but now I do. Paul has what I call a very good intuitive organizational alarm clock. Okay, like your alarm clock at home, when it goes off, it's kind of annoying, but it's usually for a good reason. You wish it didn't go off, but you know it means you ought to get up and get going. Summer of 93, so 11 years in, we're successful. We're not really done. The marketplace had started to eat into our market because others were copying us because we only wanted one. Sales were still pretty good, but we were having lower and lower profitability. We were having lots of arguments over big decisions because it was harder and harder to decide what to do in the long run. When people would call with opportunities, we didn't really know what to do, and we'd argue about it a lot. Anyway, his intuitive organizational alarm clock was reading all these signs, and he sits me down on a bench in front of the deli one morning, mid-morning, when I should have been in there getting ready for the big lunch rush, and he goes, okay, in 10 years, what are we doing? I'm like, what? It's like, in 10 years, what are we doing? I'm like, dude, why are you asking me this? Like, I got to go get ready for lunch. And he goes, no, sit here. I'm like, Paul, man, we got work to do. And he goes, this is our work. In 10 years, what are we doing? I'm like, I don't know what we're doing in 10 years, but in 10 minutes, I better be back in there or we're going to get crushed. Because, see, I wanted to work in the business, and he intuitively knew we needed to work on the business. And I resisted him at that stage. And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, this is critical, man. In 10 years, what are we doing? Are we still here? Have we sold the business? Are we working in the business? Is this crazy that we only have this one store? People are copying us. Our market's being eroded all the time. I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't have time for this. In hindsight, I didn't have time not to do it. Okay. To our credit as a partnership, we spent a year trying to answer that question, which included lots of arguments, lots of swearing, lots of eye rolls, lots of discussion. And out of that, we wrote a new vision, which in essence was this fourth stage of Edgar Schein's development, which is we changed the organization. We wrote a new vision. The key bullet points are here. The whole vision's in the back of the first business book. It was called Zingerman's 2009. I'm on page 7. I backed up. In the middle of the page, there's some key bullet points. We decided that by 2009, we would have this community of businesses. So we'd had one deli for 12 or 13 years, and now we said, whoa, we're changing everything. It's not like things were bad, but we were changing everything. We had the courage in hindsight. And I'm not tooting our own horn, it's just in hindsight I could see it. We had the courage to say, in 15 years, it's going to be true to where we started, but way different than what's going on now. Y'all won't believe it. We're going to have a community of businesses, all located here in the Ann Arbor area, Each business will have its own unique specialty. Each business will have a partner who signs on the loans and owns part of it and loves what that business does. We're going to operate as one organization with these semi-autonomous pieces within it, where each piece contributes positively back to the other pieces. And we wrote that vision. What kind of response do you think we got when we rolled that out? Never work, terrible, stupid, you guys are nuts. Yeah. Where did you get this from? Nobody does this. Bingo. Paul and I have learned over the years, if everybody tells us it's a bad idea, we know we're going in the right direction. If everybody tells us it's a good idea, I start worrying that I'm missing something really bad. If you're going for greatness, you're going against the flow. At this stage, it's easier to do it when you're a startup because nobody's looking at you. When you already had success, it's a lot harder. Why didn't the auto companies shift to trains? Because who wants to be the guy or the woman who gets up in front of 50,000 employees in the whole country and says, man, we've been really letting y'all down. And I know I had you doing this work, but it's really out of date and not inspiring. Here's a better future. Like, you got to have guts to do that. And whether that's social change, business change, or personal change, it's not easy to be the one standing up there taking pot shots and having the lawyers tell you you're crazy, the employees telling you you're crazy, people leaving because they're mad. But of course, 10 years later, we were geniuses again. Today, everybody loves that vision because it's all local and it's really entrepreneurial and it nurtures entrepreneurial business thinking in our organization and it's brilliant. But at the time, nobody liked it. That was change. When we went through that change, we lost all of the long-term deli managers that had been there 4, 5, 6 years, ended up leaving. Why? Because they were good managers for the third stage, which is running systems, but they were bad managers for the fourth stage, which was changing. Because changing is like going back to being a startup, but it's bigger. So you got to have the resilience and quickness and determination of the startup, and you got to have the willingness to stick with it more patiently because it's a lot bigger and it's not going to change on a dime.
Was your only change to organically grow new businesses, or did you make adjustments to the existing businesses that you had?
We made adjust. The question is, did we adjust what we had, or did we just do it organically? It's kind of some of both. What we did was we made a systemic decision, which is not critical, but we pulled out the administrative staff and made them their own entity in the belief they could do kind of what Gary and these guys do for some of you all. They could provide infrastructure and wisdom and support.
So HR, finance, and legal are all...
Correct. So that like you could have Zingerman's Candy Manufacturing where they have like 5 employees and a managing partner, which is like a little startup, but where they got access to HR expertise, CFO expertise, IT expertise that they could never have afforded otherwise.
And they bitch about the chargeback because they really don't.
And they bitch about the chargeback, but I long ago made peace with the reality. I just said the people on the front line always complain about how much they pay. They all say they overpay. The people in the center all say they're overworked, and they're both right. Get over it. It's like taxes. You could complain about it all day, but in the end of the day, just take it, use your services. Let's get going. It's not helping. So yes, the IT guy made a mistake. Have you never made a mistake? Well, that's different. No, it's not. Did we fire you the minute you made one? No. Well, then why do you want me to fire him, man? We're all trying to get to the same place. We're all human. But my point is that we stuck with the change. Why? Because we had written this vision that we were inspired by that was a better future. We had shared the written vision. When you've shared this written vision with everybody, it's a lot harder to bail. It's easy to bail if only your wife knows what you're doing. But if you told the world this is what we're going to do, you don't bail. Because your integrity says this is where I'm going. I said I'm getting there and I'm going to lead you all there, and that's where we're going. So we stuck with it and we made it. But my point is, going through that change is difficult. If you look at page 13, there's just a little chart to sum up some of this stuff. So let's just sort of run you back through what you learned I want to show you some stuff. So needed strengths. At the creating or startup stage, let's think about it. You told me this morning, what are some of the strengths that are helpful if you're managing or leading at this first stage? You're in a startup. High energy. Intuition. Bend but don't, I like that. Bend but don't break.
Set your goals in concrete, but your plans in sand.
Oh, I like that. Set your goals in concrete, but your plans in sand. I like that. You guys this section is doing really good over here.
I had that coffee cake just now, so I'm back.
Hey, it's no joke, but good food actually contributes significantly to your, I'm not joking, to your emotional, intellectual energy. This is one of the biggest problems of people who don't have access to good food. And then we want them to think right. It don't work. It's true. At the second stage, the leader's strengths needs to be willingness to delegate and the ability to hire like-minded people that can take on the things that we're delegating. At the third stage, now we're in this big running a sports franchise. What are some of the strengths that you need there? Bringing in expertise, being willing to pay for the expertise, because your brother-in-law won't cut it at that stage. Working on the business. Here's one more I forgot to mention, I'm going to mention now. At the second stage, you're delegating. At the third stage, it becomes about assigning entire areas of responsibility. That's a very different thing. Delegating is like, Scott, would you lock up tonight? But tomorrow night, it's back on me. Giving responsibility where you're giving the entire area, it would be, Scott, you're in charge of this store. If you need me to close once in a while, let me know. So at the second stage, it's delegating a task, but it falls back on a leader when it's not been delegated. At the third stage, I've assigned responsibility. O'Day's in charge of all marketing. It doesn't matter whether he's on vacation. He's still in charge of marketing. If there's a problem with an ad we ran and he didn't know about it, he's still responsible. If Scott locked up on Tuesday night, but something went wrong on Wednesday, it's clear it's not his fault. It's mine. Is this making sense? This is a big thing. Okay, the third stage also, being willing to stick with changes and design systems become really important strengths. At the fourth stage, courage, vision, resilience, emotional resilience, energy, all become critical. Here's what I want to show you. If you take the strengths that you wrote in this first square on the upper left-hand corner under startup, quick change, being willing to do all the work, bend but don't break, and you move it down to this third stage, what was causing you to be successful will now cause you to fail. Because if it's all about you at the third stage, you're going to be so exhausted, you'll quit. And everybody's going to hate working with you if you don't. If you change stuff at the third stage as quick as you changed it at the first stage, it's called chaos. If you got 150 employees and every 2 weeks you're changing the product mix, it's not going to help because you got a training program now that you need to train salespeople, and every 2 days they got different stuff to sell. They throw up their hands and go, what am I supposed to do? Okay, so what I want to show you is what got you to success here is going to get you to failure here if you're not mindful. That's why understanding is so important. What I'm sharing with you is just the way it is. And that's why acceptance is so important. Because if you pretend that you're in a startup when you're really in this third stage, how's that going to go? Okay, this is like when we're 45 and we buy a fancy sports car so we could pretend we're 22. We're still not 22, and I'm not down on sports cars. It's just owning where we are in life, accepting what's really happening. The vision throughout is really critical. Do we have one? When you started, you had one. Most of us lose it. It's been finished. The good news is you can always write one. Okay? Is this making sense to you? Does anybody know about the Peter Principle? What's the Peter Principle?
Rise to your level and become wise.
Yeah, say it louder for them.
Rise to your level and
Yeah,
become
people are promoted. The Peter Principle, Lawrence Peter wrote a book. It was actually a humorous book in 1969 about hierarchy and bureaucracy. And what he said is that people are always promoted to their level of incompetence. We'll just keep promoting you until we get you in over your head. The Peter Principle has become accepted wisdom in the organizational world, but I don't buy it. I don't think that people are promoted. All of us, when we start anything, are incompetent. When you had your first kid, you were incompetent. When you started your business, you didn't really know what you were doing. When you started to do the skill that you're now good at, you didn't know what you were doing either. The difference is you learned. You made mistakes. You learned from your mistakes, and you knew you had to get better. Good parenting is not about perfection. It's about having a vision of what your relationship with your child is going to look like and how your child will be raised. Then when you have that vision, lots of bad things happen, frustrations happen, but you know where you're going. When you're in a startup, there's bad stuff happening every day. It's just you've got this vision, so you learn from the mistakes, you adapt, and you keep going. I believe that this chart, this stuff I just taught you, no one knows it. So all they're doing is applying this skill set at this level, and it's not working. They're treating their 16-year-old like they're 6. And when a 16-year-old doesn't respond well, they yell at them. That don't work. Sir.
My son just graduated high school, and he said, he said, yesterday I had to raise my hand and go to the bathroom, and today you expect me to understand what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I couldn't go to pee yesterday because I had to get permission.
Yeah.
Now I need to make all my decisions.
Yeah. And that's why I want to teach everybody in our organization from the minute we hire them how to run a business, not how to be an employee. Because giving them a business card and a title, they're going to keep asking your permission to go to the bathroom. And if they're asking me to go to the bathroom, figuratively or not, my day is a nightmare. What I want is people coming to me, which I have, going, I got an idea for a Zingerman's business. This is a true story. A woman came to me, she's been working there 4 months. She goes, I know that we want to have, I know our vision, and I know we want to have 12 to 18 businesses. Could I meet with you to talk about my idea? Of course you could talk to me about your idea. She wants to open a Zingerman's B&B. Will it happen? I don't know. But you got an hourly employee working on the floor selling olive oil. She's been there 4 months. She's not making $200,000 a year. She doesn't have an MBA or anything, but she has an idea. She's thinking like a business person, like an entrepreneur. In the old days, my job was to be the entrepreneur. Now my job is to train entrepreneurs. That's why part of why we get along is Gary and I have the same job. What questions do you have?
What's your compensation model?
You mean like how do we figure out what to pay people?
Well, is it profit sharing?
Oh, yeah, so we're open book management. That's a whole nother thing, but it's a system that you could use at any of these stages, but for us became particularly important at the 3rd stage where we were running a sports franchise. Open book management comes from a book called Great Game of Business, which was written by the people at Springfield Remanufacturing in Springfield, Missouri, based, using my sports metaphor, based on the belief that most of the people in business don't know the rules of the game they're playing, they don't know the score, and they don't get anything when the team wins, and if they do get some, it's in a very paternalistic sort of, nice job, son, here's $100, which is better than getting nothing, but they got no clue what they did to make the $100 appear, so they can't recreate it the next time. Open book is you involve everybody in running the business. In order to run the business, they need to know how much money you got. They need to know the score. They need to know how much time is left in the game. Because all day long they're making decisions. I asked this the other night, but if you're in a basketball game and there's 22 seconds left and you get the ball, should you go quickly up the court or slowly? It totally depends. If you're winning, you go slowly. If you're losing, you go quick. The employees don't know how much time is left, and they think they're up by 40, not losing by 2. They're goofing around over here, whatever, and the clock's running out, and the coach is on the sideline screaming. But if you didn't show them the score and they don't know how much time is left, the decision they made seemed fabulous to them. So that's what open book is. So there's gain sharing in each business. The higher up you go in the organization, the bigger percentage should be variable based on the performance of the organization. We don't do it because I think it's motivating. I mean, it is for some people, but I don't care about the motivational piece. What I care about is I want to treat you like you're in business. When the business does well, you get a lot. I don't care if you wanted a lot or not. It's how it works. When the business doesn't go well, you don't get a lot. It sucks. Hello, welcome to my world. Now, the higher up you get, the bigger the up and the bigger the down. So it's not like their salary gets cut first. Mine gets cut first if there's not enough money. But at least they're all in the game and they all understand that we're going up together or we're going down together, because the other model is all like this. They all think you're getting rich and they're getting screwed. And you're in the back room and you can't figure out how to pay the bills, and all they're mad about is where you hid the money. I'm like, I wish I knew where they hid the money. This is like we all know together when it's not good or good. So that's how it is. Page 14. We do a whole 2-day Zing Train seminar on open book management. I cannot give you enough reasons why you should do that because I think it's the future. It only makes sense. Take a minute on page 14 and reflect. What's the most interesting or helpful thing you learned? And then you might want to jot down a few action steps. And if you're really a good list maker, which many of you are, on page 12 there's a whole summary. You can write a lot of action steps. So take a minute and reflect. What's the most interesting thing you learned this morning about stages of organizational development? And then what's an action step or two you're going to take when you get back to work? Today, tomorrow, tonight, or whatever. And I'm going to hear a few thoughts, so get ready to talk. When you got a few thoughts jotted down, I'd like you to find somebody else in the room. It doesn't have to be who you came from, and I'm going to give you a few minutes just to share thoughts in groups of 2 or 3. See what you learn. You might learn something. Stranger things have happened. So that means noise will have to commence. What are some of the most surprising, helpful, interesting thing you learned this morning? I hope you learned something.
Have a vision.
Have a vision. What else? What did you learn today?
Turn loose and delegate.
Turn loose and delegate. See, if you have the vision, they know when you delegate and turn them loose, they know where they're supposed to be going already. And if you have the guiding principles in writing, they know what the rules are about how we treat people, how we work together. What else did you learn?
On the second question, from an employee standpoint,
Yeah.
in sales and
Yep.
organizations, moving parts beyond me closing a deal to intentionally breed belief into all colleagues whose work affects my profitability and success. I think if you're negative about mistakes they make that brings my goals lower,
Yep.
that's what you'll get in the future.
Beautiful.
Rather than speak the belief.
That's very true. What else did you learn? Try to impress Gary. Come on.
Courage.
Courage. It's hard to know what, no one really knows what to do. The key of this is there is no safe path.
You have to have a belief.
Yeah. You got to have a belief in yourself, belief in your vision, belief in the people you're working with. There's no safe path, and this is the tricky part. We start to believe there's a safe way, and there isn't. It's either slow death or change. And I just have learned for me is I would rather fail going after what I believe in than fail going after what everybody else told me I ought to do. I want to go out playing my game, not their game. What else did you learn?
How do you find the courage to go into something later in life, to try to go out there and try something new?
Therapy? No,
That's the thing, we have businesses, but I really want to do something else also.
well, come back this afternoon and we're going to talk about that.
Have that stamina.
Are you coming this afternoon? If you're not, I won't take it personal, but I just...
I didn't know there was actually.
Oh, well, there's, if you see Gary, I'll bet he could get you in. But this whole book is on managing ourselves, and there's an essay on personal vision. And one way I believe that we do that is we actually do the visioning essay work the way I wrote it, and then you write a vision of the future. And in that future, it's your life. It's not your significant others. It's not what your employees want. It's not what the community tells you how to do. It's your life. And I don't mean do something stupid and foolish, but I mean there's dreams that we all have. And it's just like when we wrote the vision in '94, there wasn't anybody telling us to do that. They all told us we were crazy. Later, they loved you. A couple more. Action steps or things you learned this morning.
More training.
More training. The bigger you get, the more the training becomes imperative. When you're a startup, you can get away with it at that first stage. Second stage, it's important. Third stage, it's essential. If you're running a multi-unit business and you don't have good training, give it up. If you're a startup with 2-3 employees, you don't really need it. What else?
Often our success of the past is an inhibitor to different kinds of success.
Yeah. So I'm not saying to abandon everything that helped you be successful, but understand you need more tools in your toolbox. And if all you're using are the tools, like if you started as a carpenter and all you had was a screwdriver and a hammer and a saw, that's fine, but there are other tools out there. And when you start doing fine-tuned woodwork, you want all of these complex tools that can help you to do things that you got away with as a 17-year-old trying to build a tree house, but it's not that great trying to build a 17-story building with beautiful design. So just build on those, be open to the other stuff. There's just wrapping up, there's a Hasidic Jewish saying that says that the teacher learns 5 times as much as the student. So I appreciate y'all letting me teach this to you because it helps me. But I taught this about 3 years ago, and there was a woman in the audience who has a little business in Massachusetts that sells cheese-making supplies. And she's pretty small. I mean, it was just her and like one employee for a long time, and then they grew some, and now her daughter's taking it over, and they got like 15, 20 employees. So they're going through some of this stuff. And at the end, she raises her hand and she goes, I just realized at the first stage, you got to trust yourself because it's all your belief in your idea, your belief in your vision. She goes, at the second stage where you start to delegate, you got to trust other people. And I was like, yeah, you know what? At the third stage, you're right. And at the third stage, you got to trust the process. And at the fourth stage, you got to do all of them at once. You got to trust your gut that it's time to change. You got to trust the other people around you because you can't do it alone anymore, and you got to trust the system all at once. So that's why I put trust up there. When you're going through this work and you're doing what you believe in, it is fun. And if it's not fun right now, all I would tell you is there's a mismatch going on with one of these stages and the style of leadership that you're trying to use. If you get them in alignment, it will become fun again. There's nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with your people, and there's nothing wrong with the business. It's just, it's out of alignment. And if you bring them into alignment through changing the way you lead or adjusting your vision, it can become fun again. Please email if you got questions. If you're here this afternoon, I'll look forward to seeing you be quite different, although I will teach this again. Thank you all for coming. Thanks to Gary and Wayne for getting this set up.